Can I help you? I need to crow when I'm live. We seriously do not need to crow while I'm live. Can we not? Or we could keep, doing your thing while we're live. That's fine. That's fine, Thanks again. I'm just trying to get started. But if that's what we're, going to do, then that's what we're going to do. Don't. Okay, so basically what we're doing is lots of crowing. We're just trying to get started, okay? We're literally just trying to get started, and I have chickens that just won't stop. The good news is, it's too hot for most of them to be out here. So we won't be bothered, except by Lonesome. We will be bothered incessantly by Lonesome because, that's just the way he is. That's just what's going on. So that's just what's happening. And we're just going to have to live with it. Anyway, let's actually get started. Don't. Seriously. So it is blazing hot out here. So welcome back to Andersen Acres, by the way. If you're new here, hi, I'm Leanne. And if you are a returning viewer, good to see you again. But it is blazing hot out here. Originally, I had intended to go be over at the garden and kind of show you some of the stuff I do. But it is way too hot. And all of that's in full sun. And it is hot, hot, hot. It is going to be blazing hot for the next 3 days, which isn't great for our wildfire situation. So that's not going to be great. But we're going to continue on anyway. We're just going to sit in the shade, which the best, coolest, shady spot in the yard puts me right where Lonesome wants to be. On the plus side, over my shoulder, there are some baby ducks, some young ducks. They're about 5 weeks old. Some young ducks over my shoulder. Seriously? He's literally right here. For the most part, the animals will be pretty invisible because I've got a bunch of chickens in here laying under the trees, staying cool. I think Shadowfax and Arwen are also passed out. These little guys have behind me, they have their shade, so they're in their pen. They were moved because they were too tall for the brooder, so they had to get kicked out. So for the most part, except for dang Lonesome right here, who has determined not to be quiet, for the most part, the animals will not be joining us. It's way too hot for them to want to be out and about. So I was going to sit back a little to get out of that beam of sun. It's hot. All right. So this is the 5th Friday of the month. Doesn't happen every single month. Most months only have 4. So as we always do, we go live on Fridays. And because today's not a part of the regular rotation, the first month I do catching up on the farm. The second month is baking. The third is an animal spotlight, that kind of thing. I thought we would do something a little more seasonal. So I thought we would talk about gardening. Well, it's really hot, so I can't be over by the garden. But we are still absolutely talking about gardening. I've received a lot of questions about the way I garden lately. And I've had people curious as to how it ever turns out. And honestly, I don't know, but it works. And I call my form of gardening Goblin gardening because it's very inconsistent, very lazy as much as I can get away with, because we have a lot of animals that require our care, especially in the hot summer months. So like the hot summer months are the worst for looking after the animals as far as keeping them healthy goes, because heat stroke is a very real concern. So I'm really very, very busy in the summer months. So the less gardening I can do, the better, but I still want to eat the produce. I still want to have my fresh tomatoes for making sauce. I still want to have all my pumpkins so I can turn them into puree. I still want all of that. I just don't want to have to put all the effort into it. So the way I garden is very chaotic and very goblin-like. except in some very specific circumstances. So let's talk about it, because I like lazy, messy, chaotic gardening that somehow still results in a decent harvest at the end of the year. So let's get into that. Anyway, so what do I mean when I talk about goblin gardening? What do I mean? Okay, I mean pretty much I just let nature take over. Okay, it's chaotic, it's intuitive, and it's a little bit feral. Okay, except for some very specific types of plants, like my root crops that are planted in the field area out back. Except for some very specific root crops that I know darn well I can't goblin garden, I mostly just do what I do and it all grows. I toss seeds where I feel like it and I see what thrives. And if you make it, great. And if you don't make it, well, sucks to you. So, and I always get a pretty good harvest. Every once in a while, I have something that completely fails. And then I learn better going forward. I tend to let the plants do the work and I just really help them get started. So yeah, I start plants in the house in my little seed starters, and then they get planted outside and they thrive or not based on their own strength of will. Sometimes I swear. I do a lot of companion planting, not on purpose. It just seems to work out that way. I don't intentionally go around going, I'm going to plant this guy with this guy because they'll, they supplement each other and this one doesn't need those nutrients from that. And I don't do that. I stick things where they fit. And it works out. So do I companion plant? Sure. It's not intentional. So, for example, I have a pumpkin growing in the compost pile. That wasn't on purpose. That just ended up there because I chucked a pumpkin that was starting to rot in there. And I think I've got about 6 pumpkin plants growing in the compost pile. So that's not intentional. And if any of the pumpkins survive the chickens and the turkey, then excellent, yay. But the compost pile is where the chickens and turkeys are right now. So there's a real good chance that those pumpkins are not going to be for me. There's a good chance that those pumpkins will be for the chickens. Good news is I tossed other pumpkin seeds up front. So I'll have pumpkins for me and pumpkins for the chickens. Works out for everyone. So I do 3 different types of mostly chaotic gardening. The first 2 are really chaotic, and the third I have to have a little more care because not all crops grow being a chaotic goblin, which is what I am when I plant. So I do true chaotic gardening where I take a bunch of seeds in my hands and I chuck them into the flower beds and I go, yay, hope you grow. And often I get a whole bunch of cucumbers popping up or a bunch of beautiful flowers or whatever I threw in. Sometimes I don't even know what I threw in. Sometimes I just grab a bunch of seeds, dump them in a bowl, chuck them out there, and if they grow, yay. And most of the time they do. Now, that type of gardening only works for small seeds. Don't try that with pumpkins. They have a much more difficult time. They kind of need to be covered with a little bit of dirt. So the real chaotic, grab your seeds, mix them in a bowl, chuck them in the flower bed, that's mostly going to work if the seeds are fairly small, like minuscule seeds. So think like your broccoli seeds, your cauliflower seeds. Most of your flower seeds, they do really well that way. In fact, I just dumped a whole bunch of cauliflower and broccoli seeds and lettuce seeds in one of my beds. Do I have any idea which is which? No. Does it matter? Also no, because you can tell the difference when they grow up. You're not going to mistake a broccoli plant for your arugula, okay? It doesn't matter until then as far as I'm concerned. I don't care. I don't care. They will grow and they will pop up and they will be what they are, okay? The second type of planting I do, I like to call it messy gardening because these are ones... Seriously, do you have to stand right there when you do that? Sorry, that's Lonesome is standing right there. And he wants to crow at me. I don't have any snacks, man. Go get some snacks somewhere else. I don't have any. The snacks are, you know what? Tristan has snacks. Go follow him. Go follow him for a while. I don't have anything. Okay, messy gardening. This is where I start things in my seed starters inside. Now, if you've watched any of my daily vlogs, you will know that I'm pretty chaotic about that too. I kind of just like, here's a bunch of seeds in the seed starter, cover them up, plop the top on, and hope for the best. But once those have grown up to the top of the seed starter top, I do take them outside and I do plant them. Now I've got Sauron on this side. Hi. That's great. Too many roosters. And the ducks are making noise behind me. Hi, guys. The ducks are in the back corner. That way. That way. That side corner. There they are. Baby ducks. They're babies. Okay, so when I plant things in my seed starter trays and they're looking all good and they're all kind of bloomy and they're not blooming, but they're, yay tall, then I take them outside and I plant them. Do I plant them in rows? I kind of just dig holes and stick them in the ground. Nature takes over. I don't mind weeds. So I've had someone comment, there seems to be a few dandelions in your, yeah, there's dandelions in there. I don't mind dandelions. In fact, I like the dandelions that grow in my garden beds because you can eat dandelions. Okay. We use the leaves for salads and we use the flowers. I like to put them on the tops of cakes and stuff. They're very pretty, very bright yellow. Thank you. I dry the tops and I use them for decorating cakes and stuff. And cupcakes and cookies and stuff like that. They're really, really adorable. Okay. I keep whacking the mic. Sorry. But I don't mind a few dandelions. I don't mind a bunch of dandelions. I let the weeds. We have what I like to call volunteer plants, things that started growing that I didn't know were growing or were going to grow. I have a whole bunch of volunteer tomato plants in the bush, and basically what was happening, and I didn't realize that this was happening last year. I didn't realize everyone was doing it. I thought it was just me. But every time somebody was picking tomatoes and they found one, one that had been munched a little bit by a chicken, thank you. But every time we found a tomato that was munched a little bit by a chicken, or, you just didn't want to take it inside and eat it, we would chuck it in the bush. But we were all doing that. And as a result, I have a whole bunch of volunteer tomato plants growing in the bush. And we'll have an interesting crop of tomatoes this year. Because I don't even remember what kind of tomatoes those were. I don't know. I had about 6 kinds of tomatoes growing last year. I don't know who tossed what or where. So that'll be fun. I don't mind extra tomatoes. We can use tomatoes. We make a lot of our own tomato sauces, a lot of our own pizza sauces. You should see our freezer in the fall. And I need them anyway, so I don't mind. I just have no idea what kind they'll be. We'll have to wait and see. We also don't fence off most of our gardens. So yeah, the chickens and the goats help manage pest control. They're helpful. I swear. They're helpful. We still do manage to get stuff every year. I just don't want to take the time to fence off the garden plots. And we have enough property and there's a whole bunch of bush and mostly they stay out of my stuff. And when they don't, as long as someone ate the plants, I'm okay. Thank you. So I am happy as long as somebody had the plants. I'm just going to adjust my microphone a little bit. That's better. But I don't really care that much. Okay. And then I sometimes have to do what I call careful gardening. And that's when you have to be more aware of how and where you're planting things. There are certain things that actually do require what it says on the package. Most of the time, that's not true. Thank you. Like cucumbers will grow pretty much anywhere. Tomatoes, I have no problem growing dozens of tomato plants at a time randomly around the property, wherever I happen to dump seeds. There goes another rooster. But some crops, especially root crops, you do have to think a little bit more about things like spacing, especially, or they turn into little lumps of goblins. So things like your carrots and your beets and your turnips and even your potatoes, you can't just shove them all in one little spot. They do need to be spaced out a little bit because they're a root crop and so they're going to grow right under the dirt there. They do need the appropriate amount of space. So in the case of stuff like that, that's what the outer plot is for at the near the field. That is what that plot is for. We specifically use that plot to plant those kind of things. The kind of things that you do have to be more aware of, spacing and seed depth and all of that good stuff. So yes, in that case, thank you. Thank you. But in that case, you do have to be a little more aware. So I like to divide my seeds into little bitty seeds that I can just chuck out in the garden and they'll either grow or not grow, and I don't care. Seeds that are a little bit bigger, like your peppers and your tomatoes, that I do like to start in the house, and then I just plant wherever, and then I don't care. And stuff that I plant from seed outside, but I am more careful about the spacing. They're all so loud. So I am a little bit more careful with things like your carrots and your turnips and things like that. And my parsnips. I really like parsnips. So in order to get a good crop of parsnips, you do have to be careful to space them properly. Otherwise, they start all growing together and you end up with like a giant clump of parsnip that doesn't even taste very good. So yeah. Some plants sort of kind of need staking. And I say sort of kind of because half the time I don't. So a lot of people talk about, well, you got to stake your tomatoes. Well, I sort of stake my tomatoes, or I'll stake some of them. Some of them I forget about. And then in the fall, I'm like, hey, tomatoes. Good for me. Usually you don't have to buy expensive garden stakes. Look around your yard. Do you have a piece of wood or a piece of metal that you can jam into the soil next to your growing tomato plants? Ta-da! You have some stakes. Okay, there was a greenhouse that got wrecked by the wind. I'm using the metal poles from that, and I'm just going to jam them in the ground in a couple of places where I think I put tomatoes. Again, I don't keep track. So maybe it's a tomato, maybe it's a cucumber. I don't know. It doesn't matter. They grow and they produce stuff, and then I harvest it off the plants, and it's fine. So my whole thing is to do what you have to do, but not a ton more than that. Okay, I like the lazy, chaotic way of gardening because it doesn't require a ton from me all the time. I don't want to have to be super, super involved. So there are a couple of crops I treat like royalty. There is a fly. Get away from my face. Squash you. I don't like flies. I don't like flies. So there are a couple of plants that I treat like royalty. One is my sunflowers. I bathe them incessantly, and it's one of my few take care of it if you want a really good crop plants is my sunflowers. Them I baby like crazy. They are planted in exactly the right spot, and they are spaced exactly the way they're supposed to be spaced, and they are watered exactly the amount they're supposed to be watered. I baby my sunflowers because I want the seeds. I love sunflower seeds. Said I need the seeds. I also baby the heck out of my carrots. And the reason I am so careful with my carrots is I love carrots. I want a lot of carrots. And in order to get a really good crop of carrots, you have to be a little more careful. So things like your sunflowers, things like your carrots, things like your parsnips, turnips, radishes, even beets. I'm pretty careful with my beets because I grow sugar beets and I process them for sugar. It's actually really easy and really fun, and I'll show you how to do that one day on a live stream. But it's really, really, really easy, and I like doing that. But in order to get a good sugar beet crop, you have to be a little bit more careful. So a lot of those you'll notice are root crops. Like I mentioned before, root crops take a little more care. So definitely be on top of your root crops. Baby them a little bit more than you might otherwise do. So, a couple of tips for people who want to be real lazy about gardening, but are still hoping for high yield chaos. Mulch. Mulch hides a lot of sins, okay? Mulch your garden beds. It can hide the weeds if you care about the weeds. I don't care about the weeds. Thank you. Our soil is fertile enough, and I add a lot of compost, and I'm really chaotic about adding the compost. There's enough nutrients for everyone. I don't care that much about weeds. But you can use mulch to hide a variety of sins. Literally, if you've got a bunch of weeds growing and you want to make them look like they're not growing, literally I don't even pull them. I just cover them in some mulch. Just put some mulch on top of them, and you kind of just walk away, and the mulch kind of just holds them down and almost suffocates them, and the weeds go away. Just be careful you don't accidentally put mulch over top of a plant you wanted to keep, because sometimes when you're being chaotic about the way you garden, what can happen is you forget what's what, and you go, I think you're a weed. Wasn't a weed. So be careful. I don't label anything. Labeling takes time. I don't have time. If you pretend the weeds are intentional, some weeds are really pretty. Okay, like dandelions are actually really pretty. And like I said, we actually use parts of the dandelion for food. The leaves are excellent in salads, and the petals are really good to decorate cakes. But if you pretend the weeds are intentional, they'll bother you a little bit less. So some weeds are absolutely gorgeous. We have some weeds here that produce really pretty blue flowers, and I just leave those. They're pretty anyway, and they're not sucking enough nutrients away from my other plants that I have to worry about it. So I don't worry too much about weeds. You can also let some things go to seed and self-sow. Hello, the dill I have growing on the side of the yard. I forgot to pick a bunch of the dill last year, and it went to seed, and this year, surprise, dill. I'm planting more dill anyway, but you know, here's your dill. There you go. So yeah, if you forget about something like dill, just tell yourself you were letting it go to seed anyway, so you don't have to plant it next year. It works. You also want to, if you want to be really chaotic about gardening, choose hardier plants that grow well in your area. Okay? Because if you grow, so I'm up in Canada, we have a short growing season and harsh conditions. If I pick a bunch of seeds that are designed to grow in sunny Georgia, okay, if I pick a bunch of seeds that are designed to grow down in Georgia and down in Florida, where it is definitely has a longer growing season, I'm going to have a harder time cultivating those plants. So pick hardier plants that are designed to grow where you live, instead of trying to grow a bunch of specialty plants that don't really thrive in conditions where you're in, because then you can chaotic garden to your heart's content, because the seeds are probably going to germinate and those plants are probably going to make it anyway, even if you try to kill them. And I did try to eliminate some of the mint that we accidentally planted. I tried to eliminate it, and I think more just came back. It's fine. We like mint. Don't worry about it. I also recommend, if you want to be really chaotic and lazy, thank you. But if you want to be really chaotic and lazy about your gardening, I also recommend that you ignore the pests, okay, until they're truly destructive. You don't have to go out to your garden every day and remove every single little bug that is on every single little leaf. Most of the bugs are fine. A lot of them are beneficial. So I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about it, okay? I generally don't care if there's some garden pests. Sometimes I chase the chickens out, because, you know, the chickens are the biggest garden pests, because they'll go and they'll eat the things right off the vine. But for the most part, I find it best to just let it go, okay? I find it best to just not worry about it. And when it comes to watering, I'm pretty lazy about my watering. I don't water in the really harsh sun, because that's really bad for the plants, and I know better. But for the most part, I'm pretty chaotic about watering. I wander around with my watering can, or I drag the hose around the yard as far as it'll reach anyway. We need a longer hose. But I'm just kind of random. I like the ducks. The baby ducks. Right there. But I am pretty random about my watering. I find that as long as you're not watering in the heat of the day where the sun is beating down, as long as you're not watering then, I don't find it matters when things get watered, as long as they get watered on occasion. Once they're really established and the roots are nice and deep, they don't even need as much water as you think they need. So I'm pretty chaotic about my watering. I think I forgot to water my tomatoes last year for like a month. I don't think I walked over to that bed for a good month, I swear. And they were fine. I don't recommend not watering, especially it's really dry this summer. I don't recommend not watering, but generally, if you forgot to water your plants yesterday, it's probably still fine. Okay, unless it's scorchingly hot and it has been scorchingly dry, you're probably okay. don't worry too much. And really, when I'm planting seeds and the plants, they start to grow and then they die, oh well. Next year, I'll plant them in a better spot. Sometimes when you're chaotic gardening, after 3 or 4 attempts, you realize that the spot you are gardening in is just not going to work. It's okay to just change your plan, move it somewhere else. Just plant it somewhere else next year. It's not really that big a deal. So, do you need some gardening tools? Nah. I use, my hands primarily. I have a little trowel that I think I stole from my dad. It's a very old little trowel, and I have only one. And usually I use my hands. You just with your hands. It's not a big deal. But sometimes a bucket. I have a garden cart that I stole from my son, which sounds really bad. It's his garden cart, but I steal it sometimes if I need to move stuff around. But for the most part, you don't need a whole lot of special tools. Yeah, you can get some. You can get, those dimpler things that make the holes for you. You can do all that. It's not necessary. You can just dig a hole and put stuff in the hole. It's fine. You can use your fingers to dig a hole, stick the plants in, cover them up, give them a little bit of water, walk away. It's usually fine. I do recommend a wide-brimmed hat and a nice cold drink when you're gardening because usually you're out in the sun. But that's as far as it goes when I recommend tools. I find you don't need to get fancy for gardening. You can be lazy and chaotic and do it on the cheap. And a pack of seeds, at least where I am, a pack of seeds is about $1. So for $1, I can get out of $1 pack of tomato seeds, I think I got 15 plants. That's pretty good for $1. So I got 15 plants. There were lots of tomatoes on each one. So it's pretty good for $1. You don't need a ton of equipment. You can, if you want to get all the fancy stuff, then you certainly can do that. If that's what you enjoy, you like investing your money in all the fancy garden stuff, or you really want this one thing, you absolutely can do that. It's just not strictly necessary. So if you want, you can just use what you already have around the house. The one thing I do swear by is compost. Compost is chaotic gold. And my real trick with the compost is I don't overthink it. Okay? I literally take the compost, especially in the rabbit compost, I take it right off the pens and dump it right in the garden. I take the compost, throw it in the garden, and I know you should always mix it in. And I've said, yeah, you should mix it in, and you should. I don't really. I just throw it on there and go, there you go. Yay. And compost works wonders. It works wonders to correct problems in the soil that you didn't even know you had. So generally, I really recommend just a bunch of compost. If you don't have a bunch of animals like rabbits or goats or chickens or horses, if you don't have that, see if you have a friend that does, because they're probably getting rid of a bunch of their manure. And if you don't have that, you can also just go to the garden center. They have compost. Okay, they have compost that's already baked down manure. So you could just get some yourself. Throw it in your garden. Be happy. I like to throw a whole bunch of compost in the fall, and then it kind of just does its thing over the winter, and come spring, boom, nice fertile soil you can plant lots of stuff in. So there's always that. Man, it's hot out here. Whew, we are creeping up to 35 Celsius, which is Fahrenheit is like 95, and it's not as hot as it's going to be. It's going to be fun. We're looking at 40 degrees by the end of the day. That'd be fun. So that's why we're in the shade. Anyway, let's just talk a little bit about which crops really love chaos and which crops don't. So crops that really love chaos, I find zucchini, kale. I find my cucumbers don't care. Most of my pumpkins don't care, except for the baby bear pumpkins seem to be a little more finicky. Except for them, most of my pumpkins don't care. My squash doesn't care. I said cucumbers already, but they don't care very much. They're all they'll grow wherever I stick them. And there are some things that I didn't think would thrive with my chaotic way of growing, like tomatoes. Do you have to get closer each time? You do, don't you? I still don't have any snacks. He's mad at me. Anyway, so there are a couple of things that I didn't think would thrive, like my peppers and my tomatoes. I used to think you had to be a little more careful with your peppers and your tomatoes. You don't have to worry about it. Don't worry about your peppers and tomatoes that much. Do you have to baby them a little? Maybe, depending on where you are and how fertile your soil is. But generally, if I plant my tomatoes in a good fertile soil and I at least remember to water them on occasion, they do fine. They're fine. So I don't worry about that. Things I won't grow chaotically is root crops. Okay, it's the root crops. I will not grow ever again because I've done it. I won't ever try to do a root crop chaotically ever again because I ended up with my sugar beets were like probably 8 beets. Like it was a goblin mass. We don't need to do that again. So we're not going to do that again. But for the most part, yeah, I chaotic garden almost exclusively. So now we've reached the section where I have some questions that were submitted to me in advance when I told everyone what I was going to be covering this week. And so some people submitted questions in advance of that. And if you are in the chat, because people are going in and out, I can see. If you are in the chat, you can drop a question in the chat and I'll try to see it. I know sometimes I miss them. But I have questions that people like to submit in advance because a lot of people can't attend the live, like a lot of people, because this is the time of day I do it. This is the time of day it works for me. Sorry if you're having to watch this on the replay. I do leave it up. I don't take them down. I do leave it up so that people can watch them later. It's just that this is the time of day that works for me. Later in the evening, I know people have asked, but later in the evening, I simply can't make work, and I cannot make early mornings work. Those are the busiest times on the farm, so we really have to work with what we've got. So, yeah, this is the time that I can actually make work. So that's the time we are doing it. So I'm going to start with some of the questions that were supplied to me over the course of the last week or so. Somebody asked, have you ever just tossed seeds and walked away? What happened? Because I'm considering just throwing a bunch of seeds in my flower bed, and I want to know if that'll work. I might. I do that all the time. That's literally what I've been talking about through a lot of this live stream. I'm very, very chaotic. A lot of flower seeds grow just fine that way. Okay? You know, you won't know what's what because you're just chucking them, right? You won't know what's what. But it's a great way to just do it quickly and easily. I would recommend using smaller seeds because a larger seed does like to be covered by some dirt. So if you're just going to toss them in the bed and walk away, I'd recommend a smaller seed. But yes, I do it all the time. That's how I plant my flower bed. I just grab all my flower seeds, mix them in a bowl, and that's how I plant them. I can't be bothered. I don't have time, okay? I don't have time. What's the strangest spot in your yard? Oh, this isn't loading. What's the strangest spot in your yard a plant has grown on its own? It's not entirely on its own, but a couple years ago, I was carrying a pack of, I think it was petunia seeds, and I tripped. I tripped on a cat, but I tripped, and so a whole bunch of the seeds spilled all over. So then last year, we had a bunch of petunias growing out from between the patio stones, because that's where I was when I fell. So it wasn't intentional, but we had some really pretty petunias in the patio stones. Okay, that works. Do you label your garden beds or just guess later? I usually guess. I can't be bought. Sometimes I label. Usually I stick popsicle sticks in and I intend to come back and write what was there later, and I just don't. And there's no way you're going to remember 2 weeks later when you finally come back and go, I should write down what that was. It was 2 weeks ago. How do I remember? So if you see popsicle sticks stuck in, they usually don't have any writing on them. So if I'm very, very smart. So some of the things that I started indoors, I will have labeled. Mostly I didn't. Like my cucumbers, I've got 4 varieties of cucumbers and I labeled them all cukes. And then I planted them in and amongst the pepper plants. So at this point, I don't know. They're all just going to grow in one big jungly mass. It doesn't matter. I can tell a cucumber from a pepper. So when they actually grow, you just pluck, right? It doesn't matter. What plants. What's a plant you grow with zero effort that thrives anyway? Tomatoes. I don't know. I'm so good at tomatoes. It's absolutely ridiculous. Okay. And I don't do anything. I just put the seeds in the ground or the plants in the ground, or halfway through the summer, I hit the nursery and whatever they have left over, I buy at a discount and I throw it in the ground and it grows too. Because then I get multiple crops. I'm very happy about that. Tomatoes, they thrive. I don't know why. Do you save your seeds or just buy more each year? Why? I buy them typically. Sometimes I save them, but for the most part, you're going to find that I buy my seeds. And the reason I do that is when your seed is produced, it's dependent on its parent plants. And most plants are not self-pollinating. Some are. Some, they can pollinate within the same plant, so that one plant will fertilize everything on it. But the problem is if you are planting things, and most things require like bees and wasps and things to pollinate, and the wind. The problem is with chaotic gardening, everything grows really close together. And so just because I'm growing brandywine pink tomatoes, which is my favorite tomato, I'm growing those, but they're growing right in and amongst my cherry tomatoes. And I've got my golden jubilee tomatoes, and everything's growing in amongst each other. There is no way to know what pollen the bee had when it visited the flower that eventually becomes the fruit. There's no way to know. So because I save a lot of seeds, but I always buy seeds if I want a specific plant, because the way I garden, and even just standard gardening, a lot of times there's no way to know if the seed you kept will produce a true to the parent seed fruit. Sometimes you just don't know. So I tend to just buy my seeds. I keep some and throw them in the ground because it's fun, especially pepper tops. If it's right around the time when we are going to be planting things anyway, I'll save pepper tops and just throw them in the ground and a whole bunch of pepper plants show up. Why not? Why not? If they're not true to the parent plant, I don't really care. But if you want true to what's on the package, just go buy them. It's a whole lot easier. But if you don't really care that much, just save a bunch of whatever you grew last year and throw them in the ground in the spring. Not a big deal. Have you ever let a plant go to seed on purpose? How did it work out? On purpose? Well, sometimes, but mostly it's by accident. So my dill went to seed, and now that entire area beyond the line of trees back there, there's like dill everywhere. It smells fantastic. But usually it's not on purpose. Usually I just forget to plant something and it goes to seed, and with dill it just blows everywhere. So now there's like dill on that whole side of the forest. Then a couple of years, I'm sure the whole yard will be full of dill. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, sometimes I let things go to seed on purpose. Usually it's by accident. What's the most unexpected volunteer plant you've ever had? The tomatoes in the bush, from us tossing the tomatoes we didn't think were good enough to bring into the house, and we tossed them all into the bush, and I didn't realize everyone was doing it. I thought it was only me doing it once or twice, and now there's a whole bunch of tomato plants growing in the bush. Why not? More tomatoes for me. Do you let weeds grow if they're pretty or helpful? Yep. One, I like some of the weeds. They're very pretty. Two, a lot of those weeds feed your pollinators, like your bees, and bees are precious. So I let them feed the bees. And I really like just ignoring them. It's a lot less work. I don't want to have to wander around and pluck every single weed. You can. And I think I have a video where I talk about how to weed and how to get the weeds out properly and all that. You can do that. I prefer not to if I don't have to. Now, there's a couple of things that you might grow that really hate weeds, and so you have to remove the weeds if you want your plants to grow. But for the most part, I find that the weeds aren't really that big a deal. They're just there, and they feed the pollinators. It's not really that big a deal. Would you rather have a garden that looks good or one that produces a lot? Produces a lot, because I use what I grow to feed my family. So I am totally fine with a chaotic, jungle-like, bushy garden if I can pick all the cucumbers and peppers and tomatoes and feed my family. Seriously, Spark? Now it's Spark. They're all here. What's your biggest accidental garden success? I'm going to go with the tomatoes again. The tomatoes in the bush are looking like they're going to produce a lot of flowers, and we will therefore have a lot of tomatoes. So I'm going with those. That was an accident. What's your funniest or most ridiculous garden failure? The year I completely forgot about one of my beds because I have a bed that's off that way, and it's the only one over there. And it was the first year I had it, and I forgot I built it. Okay, I built it and I put all the dirt in and I planted stuff in it, and then I promptly forgot about it because I can't see it from this part of the yard, the part of the yard I'm in frequently where I look after the animals and that. I can't see it from here because it's past those trees. And I just forgot about it. And eventually I remembered, I went, oh no, they're all going to be dead. But I went out there and it was pumpkin land. There was pumpkins literally everywhere. So that was a non-issue. So yay, good for us. It was fine. I didn't water it all summer. Like, I didn't water it all summer. It somehow just emerged. Have you ever lost track of what you planted and harvested a mystery vegetable? Well, usually you know what they are when you pick them, okay? When you harvest them, you're pretty sure you can tell them apart. I know some people are like, well, I can't really tell the difference between a cucumber and a zucchini. It's actually pretty easy once you really learn the differences. So you know what it is when you pick it. But have I lost track of what I planted where? Frequently. So I frequently have no idea, and then things finally start turning into fruit, and I'm like, that's where I put the peppers. It all works out in the end. It doesn't really matter. Do you plant in rows or just in patches or a total free-for-all? Depends on my day, how I feel that day. Some days it's like, I'm going to plant in neat little rows this year, and everything's going to be perfect and pretty. And then by the next day, I'm like, I'll just plant in a patch, just this one patch. And then by the day after that, I'm like, nope, total goblin chaos. So it depends on the day. By the end of the planting season, my beds are pretty much total chaos. Even if I started out trying to make it look nice and stay off me. Sorry, there's a bug. There's a bug on me. Of course there's a bug on me. I'm outside. But yes, every once in a while I start out with good intentions and I try to make everything, I'm going to make everything look good. It's going to be in rows. A week later, I'm like, I don't care. I'm just putting plants in. Yeah, I like it like that. What's the worst case of plant overcrowding you've ever seen or caused? I got a little carried away with the lettuce last year. I think I have a video on it. I planted way too much lettuce in one little box, and it was like lettuce everywhere, and it was just ridiculous. And I'm like, look, we got to eat some salad here. We got to be eating the salad. We're making salad. I don't care if you don't want salad again. It's too bad for you because there's salad growing by the bucket full. And it just went on all summer. I tried to be a little more intentional with the lettuce this year. Well, I think I threw in a few more seeds yesterday. I should probably... Thanks. I should probably stop doing that. Have you ever planted something and completely forgotten it till harvest time? Yes. My zucchini. I forget about it every year. I forget zucchini exists. Mostly because I don't really like zucchini. I do not like zucchini. I know a lot of people love zucchini, but I grow it because it's really good in like your chocolate cakes and it's really good for the animals. So I grow it a lot for the animals. But because I don't like zucchini, I tend to forget that it exists. So I'll plant my zucchini and then completely forget about it and then be like, hey, there's zucchini under here. Oops. But you know what? As long as it grows, it doesn't matter. A lot of the plants have a lot of the same requirements. So if they're growing in a bed and you're taking care of the other plants, and even if you forgot that plant is there, probably still fine. What crops do you think are the most forgiving for goblin-style gardening? Cucumbers, zucchini, squash. Squash doesn't care. Squash doesn't care what you do with it. But I find that zucchini will just grow no matter what you do to it. Cucumbers are pretty forgiving. Berries, most of your berries, like it doesn't really matter what you do with your raspberries. it's hard to screw up raspberries. Just put them somewhere where there's dirt. They'll grow. I find things like that are pretty difficult to screw up. Anything that's a bush, thanks. Anything that's a bush is usually pretty easy to look after. So there are some things that are really, really easy to chaos garden because you just don't have to pay any attention. Some things require a little more care, like you might have to pay a little more attention to watering when it comes to things like your tomatoes. My tomatoes grow out of nowhere, so that's not an issue. Can I talk for 5 minutes without you crowing? No, that's a no. I'm not allowed. So a lot of the what we call beginner plants like cucumbers and zucchinis are really, really easy to just randomly garden, to just be to be completely chaotic and goblin-like when you're gardening. It doesn't matter. You'll probably survive anyway. So start with those. Also, your kales and your lettuces, most of your lettuces, like your arugula can be a little, I love arugula. So arugula can be a little dicey, but most of your lettuce, as long as they're not in direct sun and getting completely roasted day after day, they're probably fine. So try lettuce. It's really easy. I find celery, once it's gotten started, is fine. Also, I find cauliflower pretty hardy. Broccoli can be a little more meh, but cauliflower tends to grow pretty well. So it depends on your climate, of course, but some things take better to being forgotten and ignored than others. Some plants really do need you to pay attention. Which crops require you to behave responsibly or they fail? Root crops. Because if you don't space them properly, they just turn into lumps. So root crops do require a little more pay attention to what's on the back of the package. But I do follow the rules for the root crops. But even there, sometimes I like to get a little wonky and I'll be like, instead of planting in rows, I'm going to plant in circles because heaven forbid I plant in rows. So, but yes, there are some things that do require you to pay a little more attention, and root crops tend to be at the top of that list. Get away. Also, I find onions to be finicky. Okay? I find onions to be finicky. If you want something that you can literally throw in the ground in the fall and completely forget about, grow garlic. You can plant it in the fall, ignore it, it's fine, and in the springtime it comes up and you go, is that where I planted the garlic? And then you can just completely ignore it. Once in a while, throw some water at it. And in the fall, when it looks dead and you go, oh, are they dead? That's when it's ready. So if you want something that's really chaotic goblin style, you might want to grow some garlic. It's easy, easy, easy. Things like onions, though, tend to be a little more annoying, especially if you're growing them from seed. They're annoying. Okay, have you ever had a jungle garden that just took over everything? Yeah, every year. Every year. I don't prune anything, and I just let them grow where they will. About the beginning of August, the front of our house just looks like a mass of green because I plant a lot of stuff there because I don't want to walk very far. So I just throw a lot of seeds in there. That's what's going to start happening this week, is I'm just going to start dumping things in there, and they just start growing and doing their thing. And then in August, it looks like a jungle grew in front of our house. Whatever, it's fine. I don't care. I'm fine with that. Do you do anything to keep your plants organized, or do you embrace the mess? I start out trying to keep them organized, but at some point, I just don't care. I'm like, whatever, just grow here. It doesn't matter to me. So I start out like, okay, this is going to be the lettuce bed, and this is going to be the peppers, and this is going to be the tomatoes. And before you know it, I don't feel like walking over to the tomato bed to add the tomatoes to there. So now there's peppers and tomatoes growing in the same box. And then I added cucumbers to that box, and I think I threw the zucchinis in there too. I think, yes, I did. And I think then my dad came over and stuck the pumpkins in there because he didn't know what was in there. So he put pumpkins in there. So I think that box is a little overwhelmed, but it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. What's your favorite lazy gardening trick? Throwing the seeds in the garden bed and dumping a bunch of water on them and walking away. It works a surprising amount of times. You just Throw the seeds in there. Get your watering can, dump a bunch of water and go, good luck. And it works a surprising amount of the time. You'd be surprised what you can get away with growing just by ignoring it for a while. Sometimes, with the best of intentions, we get too involved with a plant, and you have to remember that plants grew without us for a long, long time. So sometimes it's literally best to just walk away. So my favorite lazy gardening hack is not doing anything. Okay? It's literally just ignoring your plants. Do I use mulch, and what kind do you like? Yeah, sometimes. Usually if I'm mulching, I don't go out and buy mulch. Usually if I'm mulching, it's because somebody left wood chips are laying around, or it's because I shredded too much paper. I didn't need that much paper for animal bedding, so I mulched the garden with it. Sometimes I mulch. Sometimes I don't mulch. It depends if I have mulch. Depends. How do you water your garden when it's too hot to move? I don't. I find that watering in the high heat isn't great for the plants anyway. And with the exception of zucchini, which can be a little bit dramatic. Okay, some plants are dramatic, and zucchini is one of them. Literally, zucchini will be like, oh, I'm going to die without a drink of water. And you give it a little bit of water, and 2 hours later, it's like, that was fantastic. So some plants are dramatic. I wait till the high heat passes before watering them anyway. If it's too hot to move, nothing gets water. I don't care. Do I compost? And what's your most chaotic compost ingredient? We compost, and we compost everything except meat. And the reason we compost everything that's not, well, meat and dairy. The reason we don't compost the meat and dairy is because we're using our compost on food crops. And it's not that you can't compost meat and dairy, you can. It's just that for food crops, we don't want to harbor bacteria. And I don't want the meat and dairy composting too close to the house, because meat and dairy can attract more rodents and stuff than your vegetables and your horse manure. So that stuff is composted way far away, like in that far, far corner of the property. And we only use it for backfill. We don't use it for our food crops. So yes, we compost, and we literally compost everything. Our compost is entirely chaotic. If it's organic, it goes in the compost. We don't care. What's your philosophy on pests? Fight them or ignore them until it's serious. I am not going to do more work than I have to do. So I don't care if there are bugs, if there are pests. Sometimes I have to chase the chickens out of there because they're the biggest garden pest. But generally, I don't worry about garden pests unless they're actually going to destroy a crop. If they're going to destroy my entire garden bed, okay, we're going to do something about it. Very nice. But for the most part, I don't worry about garden pests. I just, you know what? Bugs are bugs, pests are pests. They just do their thing. If they're not actually destroying the entire crop, I walk away and don't worry about it. Have you ever used animals to help garden? Yeah, we use the ducks. Ducks are really good at getting the pests you really don't want, like the slugs. Ducks love slugs. So if you have ducks, they will go into your garden and they will get the slugs. And that's fantastic. So we use the ducks. And I guess we sort of use the chickens and the goats, not on purpose. They should get out of there, but I don't take the time to put fences around my stuff. So sometimes I'm like, get out of the garden. It happens. What's the best accidental companion planting you've discovered? I have discovered that my squash grows really well if I accidentally plant it near raspberries. Don't ask me why that worked, but my squash really likes to be planted by raspberries. It's not planted by raspberries this year because I moved the raspberry plants because they were making me mad because they're prickly. And every time I was harvesting other stuff and I wasn't harvesting raspberries, and I'd scratch myself on the plants, so they made me mad. So I dug them up and moved them over there. So they're not over there now. But yeah, my squash really liked growing with the raspberries. Do you clean up your garden in the fall, or do you just let it die back on its own? I clean up some of it, but we're going to use all of that for compost anyway. So even when I do rake it all out and clean it up, and I'll just chuck it in the compost pile anyway. So a lot of times I kind of rake it and leave it because that's going to get covered in more compost, and it's just organic material anyway. So as long as it's organic material. What's one tool you can't garden without? Hands. I don't need a tool. There's a bee. He's getting some nectar from a dandelion. Leave him alone or I'm gonna smoke you. Yeah. Don't eat that bee. Don't eat the bee. Thank you. Leave the bee alone. Sorry, chicken was thinking about eating that bee. I know they eat bees when I'm not looking. I know they eat bees when I'm not looking. But I just don't want to do it while I'm looking. We like bees. So yeah, my hands. I primarily garden with my hands. You know, it's nice to have a trowel if your dirt is like really tough. But for the most part, if you don't have a trowel, you can just dig a hole with your hands. It's fine. What gardening chore do you avoid as long as humanly possible? Weeding. I don't like weeding. That's why my philosophy towards weeds tends to be, it's pretty enough. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I don't enjoy weeding. I hate it. So for the most part, we just go, it's a weed. So what? How's your garden doing right now? What's thriving? Okay, so for us, it's still really early in the season. I know end of May is a big time for a lot of people. They already have stuff they can harvest. We still had snow 2 weeks ago. So we're just at the very beginning of the season. However, my tomatoes look really good. Some of my herbs are dead because the cat laid on them. But my tomatoes are looking like they're going to thrive. I'm waiting for my pumpkins to come up. My cukes are coming up. They're looking really good and strong, so they're good. But it's still really, really early in the season for us. So I know for a lot of people, they're like, I'm going to have cucumbers in 2 weeks. I'm so happy for you. This is May, and in May, we still had snow. It kept snowing in May. That's right. We live in Canada. Sometimes it snows in May. Now we have wildfires. We don't ask. What did you plant this year that you probably shouldn't have? Sorry, people are sending me messages that I don't need. What did I plant this year that I probably shouldn't have? It's not that I shouldn't have planted it. It's just, I'm really not sure I'm going to eat it. I planted a whole lot of turnips, and they're growing pretty well. They've sprouted, and they're doing their thing. I don't like turnips. And I don't know anybody who really likes turnips. My kids don't like turnips. My mom kind of sort of likes a turnip. So I probably shouldn't have planted the turnips, but I want to just because I could. So I probably shouldn't have planted them because most people in my family just don't like turnips. So I probably shouldn't have planted them. Is there a plant you always meant to try but never got around to? Those really nice Cinderella pumpkins. I keep meaning to plant the Cinderella pumpkins. Hi. We've all shown up, have we? Yeah. That's our turkey Blue. We love Blue. So I always want to grow those Cinderella pumpkins. I just haven't gotten around to it. I tend to grow baby bears, sugar pumpkins, and jack-o'-lantern pumpkins every single year. And I really would like to just grow a different kind of pumpkin because I really like the Cinderella pumpkins, but I just never get around to it. Do you keep a garden journal, or does your garden live only in your head? Every year I start to keep a garden journal. And then at some point I'm just like, whatever, I don't remember what's what anyway. Probably if I wrote down what was what, I would remember, but I am too chaotic to worry about that. What do you wish more people knew about imperfect or chaotic gardening? I wish more people knew that nature doesn't need perfect rows. It is okay to just be a little weird, to be a little chaotic, to goblin garden, as I like to call it. It will still grow. It doesn't need to be perfect to grow. All right, you can still enjoy gardening if you don't have a ton of space. You can still enjoy gardening if you're not into the perfect rows. You can still enjoy gardening if your containers aren't perfect. Gardening does not have to be perfect. Okay? I wish more people realized that. I wish more people understood that you don't have to wait until your setup is perfect to start a little bit of gardening. You can grow some herbs in a windowsill. Okay? You're not waiting for perfection. Just start growing something. Whatever you're going to use, whatever you enjoy, right? Just start growing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm certainly not perfect when it comes to gardening. Most of my stuff thrives. Every once in a while, I have something that just kind of, and that's fine. That's part of gardening. even if you're really, really, really good at it and you do everything perfect and everything's planted in perfect little rows, at some point you're going to have a failure and you're not going to understand why. And that's completely okay. All right? It is completely okay to have a failure, to not be perfect. So that's what I wish people knew more about. I wish they knew that it's okay not to be the perfect gardener, that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to be completely chaotic about it. And Blue, if you would go over there and stop those two roosters from being annoying, that would be excellent. Yeah. That way. Thank you. Sorry, I'm sending the turkey. I'm sending this turkey to, there's a couple of roosters going at it, and I'm sending the turkey to break it up. He's going. That's what his job is, okay? The turkey handles it. Either the turkey will handle it, or vodka's about to show up. So either way, the roosters better knock it off, because right now it's now it's the dog. So yeah, the roosters aren't allowed to fight. First the turkey starts to get involved to break them up, and if the turkey doesn't work, the dog handles it. Anyway, I do have to go. That's why I have to live stream fairly early in the day for everyone watching this on the replay, because they couldn't tune in. I'm sorry. But I will schedule next week's live stream as soon as I can, so you can see the topic. Go ahead and submit your hobby, farm, or homesteading questions in advance, either on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on TikTok now, but I don't like it, so don't do it there. Thanks, guys. So absolutely feel free to submit your questions in advance. I know that so many of you can't join me on Friday afternoon. A lot of you are still at work. Unfortunately, I can't move it later in the day. So submit your hobby, farm, or homesteading questions to me either here on one of my videos or on Facebook. You can just send me a Facebook message. I'm there as well, so it'll be fine. I'll put your questions on a list just like this, and I will get to them next week. And now we're just completely going to be a chaotic mess behind me for a while. Anyway, I have to go because I have a lot of stuff that I still need to get done. I will see about pushing the live stream later. I've had a whole bunch of people ask, but frankly, the evenings are very, very busy around here. But anyway, that's basically how I like to garden like a goblin. Lazy, chaotic, somehow still managing to harvest food for my family. Whether you garden with precision or like a gremlin in the dirt, the point is to just get growing. So thanks for hanging out with me in the shade today. It is really, really, really hot here. And hopefully you will come back next week. That's about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. We'll see you tomorrow. We will exit by moving the tripod and letting you look at those roosters that won't shut up.